Hi, welcome to a new episode in the Internet Surfer, hosting the most horror and creepiest stories from Reddit. Please don't forget to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy.
How to survive college. Chicken tenders aren't worth dying for. A long horror story from Reddit Nosleep. Okay, I'm in college now. And Kate just had a lot of free time in her job when she wasn't chasing down a barn cat that ran off with a dismembered camper's severed hand. That never happened more than once. Anyway, I'll try to organize everything here, since I think this is just going to be a thing from here out. Because the weirdness didn't stop with the rain. I wish I could say I was surprised, but old land is everywhere and maybe the student body changes every year, but colleges have a way of persisting their own history. The next morning, I went with Cassie for breakfast. So far she was the only person I knew after all. I told her that I had orientation today. She glanced sourly at the rain. It ran in sheets down the glass, encasing the cafeteria. It was supposed to continue all day, she said. It had turned back into snow sometime in the evening. It was 20 degrees out yesterday. I spoke. This is not normal. I know. Global warming, I guess? Though the teachers say this area always has these weird warm snaps for a few days in the winter. Same thing the student at the graveyard said. Only when it rains? I guessed. She looked uncomfortable and said it sure seemed that way. Probably something to do with pressure changes along with the storms. I don't really have the time to go digging through Wikipedia as to how the weather works, homework and all, so maybe someone can tell me in the comments if that's a thing that happens or not. I know the temperature can drop with storms, but I can't remember if I've ever seen it rise this dramatically before. I didn't ask Cassie anything else about the rain, because she seems like she doesn't want to talk about it. I think I get why. On the campground there were always people that broke the rules, and I think for some of them, it wasn't because they were bad at following rules, but rather they didn't want the rules to be necessary. They wanted their nice, safe world where they understood everything and there was nothing malicious lurking in the shadows. So, they broke the rules, as if daring the world to prove itself to them. Cassie doesn't strike me as someone who would do anything so reckless. The discomfort is there, though. She doesn't want the rain to be something more than just rain. I'm not really one to judge at the moment. I didn't break the rule, but I kind of stretched it. Look. There was no way in hell I was missing orientation. I didn't know you needed shower sandals, FFS. Who knew what else I was oblivious to? Turns out I didn't know some professors assign reading homework before classes even start, so orientation was a smart choice, at least academically. The rain hadn't stopped by the time I needed to leave for the student union. I was already rationalizing my reasons for going out. Rules were mostly for people with no experience in the inhuman. The rain today felt different from last night as well. At that time, it felt malevolent. I kept thinking of that impact I saw, like the rain itself was chasing that girl. Right now, the rain just looked like, well, water. And there wasn't that much of it. Cassie turned away from her computer when I started putting on my shoes. It's raining, she said. It's drizzling, I replied. Does drizzling count? I doubt it. When people think of rain, we think of actual rainstorms, and this is not a storm at the moment. Cassie looked skeptical, but finally admitted there wasn't anything more specific than to not go outside while raining. Everyone had different opinions on it, at that. Some people believed you couldn't go outside when it was raining at night. Others said it was only during school days, which was pretty convenient for when they wanted to skip class, I thought. And certainly, there wasn't any agreement on what happened to the people that broke this rule. This was what I liked about Kate. Kate was possibly a psychopath, but she figured things out. She was methodical. She looked for patterns, and she even risked herself sometimes, trying to understand exactly what the trigger and the consequence was. Cassie still looked worried, though, so I compromised by asking the student Discord if drizzling counted. It was a waste of time. I was greeted by a lot of people that didn't know, didn't care, or were just there to troll. Well, I'm going out, I said, grabbing a jacket. I didn't abandon my hometown and piss off my family just to chicken out now. Cassie grabbed the sleeve of my jacket. I twisted, staring down at her as she sat in her desk chair. Her narrow face was etched with concern. Hey, she said softly. I've only been here one semester, but I don't think this is a joke. I haven't seen anything personally, but some of the upper-class students actually seem scared when it rains. Honest. I gently tugged and pulled the sleeve out of her hand so I could finish putting the jacket on. I believe you, I replied. I do. There was some weird stuff going on in my hometown. But these things are sticklers about triggering conditions and it's drizzling and I have a feeling that doesn't count. Besides, I survived the shuriken, so I'm feeling fairly good about my odds right now. What? Cassie asked in surprise. Shuriken, I replied. Tried to kill me. I grabbed my room key and headed out the door. I heard Cassie jumping from her chair to follow me into the hallway. Hey! Cassie yelled at me as I briskly walked away. Shoo what? But I was already at the door to the stairwell, and Cassie was left to hopelessly search for the 5 search results that come up for a word that not even Google can figure out based on uneducated guesses. Okay, maybe I'm a bit of a troll myself. I won't lie, I was a bit nervous when I left the dorm. I mean, this was a substantial change for me, and it still felt overwhelming simply to be here. This is not a big school, but it feels huge to me, and I've never seen so many people all packed together in one area like this. My graduating class had only 37 people. It was hard to distinguish my anxiety from being in an unfamiliar place and unfamiliar situation from being anxious, because there was something else out there with me. At least, I wasn't the only person out in the drizzle. Apparently, I wasn't the only one willing to take my chances. A handful were heading in the same direction I was, but I'm a fast walker, and I quickly passed and outdistanced most of them. The wind picked up as I was nearing an imposing concrete brick of a building. It was newer than the surrounding halls, so it was built vertically instead of a stately sprawl, and the dated simplicity of the architecture made me think it was built perhaps in the 60s or 70s. The entryway was recessed significantly, so that the second floor of the building formed an overhang. It also was part of a row of buildings that formed this part of the walkway into a broad corridor, so at first I thought the rising wind was from a wind tunnel effect. Then I heard someone yelling behind me. Run, they screamed. I did not run. I turned around. Like I said, I lack Kate's survival instincts. I'm kind of like a dumb cow watching the incoming train in bemusement. Behind me was a student, running at a full sprint in my direction. Behind him was a wall of rain. I watched it approach with mounting horror as the front of it swept across the grass, tearing through the branches of the trees and covering the pavement with a thick sheen of water. Like the sky was drawing the curtain closed. I don't think I've ever felt this way about an approaching rainstorm. I mean, it was just rain, right? So why did it feel like my chest was tightening, squeezing all of the air out of my lungs? Did I really have a reason to be afraid of rain? That's the sort of thinking that gets people killed all the time. So, when the young man yelled at me to run again, this time I did. His words stirred me to life, and I ran, and his longer legs let him quickly catch up with me. He grabbed my arm and pulled, dragging me at an angle towards that nearby building. The shadow of the overhang swallowed us up and shielded us from the rain, but the man with me kept going. He yelled to get inside. We both hit the doors at the same time, and they slammed open at the impact, letting us tumble through into the damp warmth of the interior. The rain swept past us as the doors swung shut. The rain brought with it darkness. As the heavier clouds covered the sky, the sunlight quietly surrendered the fight. It was as dark as dusk outside, and the rain made shapes in the shadows between streetlights. Wow, he finally gasped. That came up fast. Was that normal? I asked. I could breathe a bit easier than him, since I hadn't run as far. Oh yes. You new here? Yeah, this is my first semester. Were you going to student orientation too? I asked. No. I'm a junior, he replied. I wanted chicken tenders from the student union. I glanced out the glass doors. The rain rippled in waves, slamming into the pavement where I'd been thoughtlessly strolling just a minute earlier. You risked the rain for chicken tenders? I asked. They're really good. He suggested we wait until the rain calmed down a bit before venturing out. Even in a downpour, like this there would be lulls, and we could run from building to building. The hardest part would be getting across the common space, he said thoughtfully. It was the big grassy expanse in front of the union where there wasn't any convenient cover, and the buildings were set back a bit. I'd given myself plenty of time to get to the orientation, just in case I got lost, so I didn't mind waiting. We both sat down on a hallway bench. I think we were only sitting there for about 5 minutes before the lights flickered. Just once. We both sat there and stared at the ceiling, waiting silently to see if it happened again. Finally, the upper-class student laughed uneasily and turned his attention back to me. The campus generators are probably having dash. And the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't stop. They buzzed at us, and there was a strange clicking noise running along them, up and down the hallway. Is that normal? I hissed. I don't know, he stammered. He frantically pulled out his phone. Asking the student Discord group, no doubt, just as I had done before leaving the dorm. I stared at the ceiling above us as the lights dimmed erratically. We wouldn't get a reliable response in time. Kate's obsession with rules was starting to be put into perspective. People don't think very well when we panic. It's just how we are. We turn into dumb, stupid animals. I admit I'm a prime example of that. But rules are simple. Easy to follow in an emergency. Same reason we do fire drills. Because when the fire is real, we need to already know what to do instead of trying to figure it out while our brains are screaming and pouring buckets of adrenaline into the hatches. I can calmly write all of this in retrospect. But at the time, I could feel my heart racing, and I didn't know what to do. There was a thump from above us, like something large hitting the floor directly above our heads. The heck was that? I hissed. Slowly I stood. It's hard to stand when your legs are shaking, for the record. My mouth was dry with fear. I've felt this way before. That sensation of dread, like a hand on the back of your neck. It fills your veins with ice and weighs your heart down with lead. I might have been shielded from the worst of the campground, but that didn't mean it wasn't still out there. Didn't mean I couldn't feel it when something was going bad. We need to go, I said quietly. What? Out in the rain? He asked, jerking his head up from the phone. Yeah. You're not supposed to go out in the rain. Look, there's no agreement on what happens if you go outside in the rain, which means it's not a death sentence. We're not going to die the moment we step outside that door. It's either we take that risk or another thump from the floor above us. Or we stay in here with whatever that is, I concluded. His eyes told me what he preferred. He stood, reluctantly, and shoved his phone into his jacket pocket. I grabbed his hand. We'd do this together, I said. We'd stick together, and as long as we did that, we'd make it to the union simply fine. It's easier to be brave when you're doing it for other people. I'm not sure why that is. The lights went out completely, and somewhere in the building a set of doors on the first floor slammed open with a crash. Go! I screamed. We burst out the front entrance, past the overhang, and out into the rain. Water splashed up around my legs each time my foot struck the pavement, soaking my jeans up to the knees. The rain rattled off my jacket and covered my glasses, turning everything in front of me into an indistinct blur. I ripped them off my face with my free hand, which didn't make things that much better. The wind howled at our backs, like it was pushing us along, shoving us forward and towards the student union. Directly ahead of us was the commons, a grassy space dotted with trees and crisscrossed with sidewalks. The glass and brick exterior of the student union fairly glowed against the darkness of the storm. It was fine, I told myself as we ran. That girl had made it to safety in time. So could we. I couldn't hear anything except the wind and the rain. I didn't dare look around me, not even at the man by my side. His hand was clutched tight with mine, and that was enough to convince me he was with me. We cut across the glass. He slipped in the soggy dirt, but I was used to rough terrain and dragged him forward until he stabilized, stumbling back into a run. Then we were at the steps to the union, taking them 2 at a time, and finally he was the one dragging me along to the front doors as his long legs outpaced me. A student inside was holding the door open. Come on, she yelled at us. We rushed past her and into the lobby, skidding to a stop. I doubled over, my hands on my knees, wheezing and struggling through the pain of the stitch in my side. Are you two okay? The student that held the door was asking. Yeah, we're fine, the upper-class student replied. She's just trying to make it to orientation in time. And he wanted chicken fingers, I coughed. The woman kindly gave me a sweater she had in her backpack in case it got cold again. If I was going to sit through orientation, she said, I needed something dry on. She told me her dorm number, so I could return it later. Then, with her good deed for the day done, she went to rejoin her friends. Well, I'm going to go now, the upper-class student said awkwardly as we stood there, dripping water onto the tile. Have fun at orientation, I guess. Then he left, and I didn't have the presence of mind to ask what his name was. I didn't even think of it until much later, when I was sitting there at the back of the hall while someone droned on about how to make payments to the bursar. I got out my phone. I certainly wasn't the only one in the hall doing so. I opened the student Discord and asked who it was that I'd just met. Said we'd come in together to the union, that I was going to orientation, and he was getting some food. After about 5 minutes, he responded with hey and a waving emoji. Which was nice, I guess. It kind of felt like I might make my first friend at college. And then he torpedoed it. Because the next thing I asked was if anyone knew what was up with the lights and the weird noises in that building. I tagged him and asked which building it was, because I didn't know the campus layout yet. And you know what? He denied anything had happened. I guess it's to be expected. Once we were back in the warmth of the union and in the safety of the herd, it was easier to imagine the reasons why nothing was wrong. Facing the reality that the world is far more dangerous than we believe is hard. If I hadn't grown up knowing this, perhaps I'd be the same way. I'm sure he went back to his dorm and laughed it off as an overactive imagination. The lights flickered because it was an old building. That thump we heard was some water running through a pipe. And that horrible feeling of dread? That part of his mind that screamed there was something in the building with us. Something that knew we were there? Something that was hunting? It was nothing, obviously. Just let himself get spooked. How could it be anything else? Yes. Turns out that humanity still needs those instincts. We might not be in the forest fending off wolves with a pointy stick, but that doesn't mean the predators aren't still out there. I just wish I knew what they are.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.